There is a door frame in a small log cabin at the edge of Loon Lake that holds the entire history of a family, carved into the soft pine, an inch at a time, over 40 years. Names, dates, little horizontal lines marking how tall a child stood in the summer of 1979, and again in 1983, and again the year she left for college and was almost too tall to bother. Tonight, the rain is coming down hard and steady on the cabin's tin roof, the way it has come down on 1,000 other nights. And an old woman named Nora is standing in front of that door frame with her coat still on and her car keys still in her hand, because she has driven 3 hours through the dark and the wet to decide whether she is going to sell this place. And she does not yet know, though she will before the night is over, that somewhere down near the bottom of that frame there is one mark she has never seen. Welcome to the Lamplit Hour, where every story is a small light left on for someone who needs it. If stories like this bring you comfort, take a moment to subscribe and stay a while. So let the rain keep falling on the old tin roof, soft and steady and close, and let the lake go dark and silver beyond the window. And let us stay here in this one small lit cabin in the middle of the wet autumn woods. There is nowhere you need to be tonight. There is nothing you need to do but breathe slowly and let the sound of the rain carry you, the way it is carrying Nora, deeper and deeper into the quiet. Let me tell you about Nora and Frank and the names carved in the pine. The drive up had taken her the better part of the evening. She had left town just after 4 while the light was still in the sky, and she had watched the rain begin somewhere around the 2nd hour. First a few fat drops on the windshield, then a steady curtain of it, so that she had slowed the old car to a careful crawl and leaned forward over the wheel the way older drivers do, peering into the small bright cone the headlights made of the wet road. The last 40 minutes were all back roads, the kind that wind through dark pine forest with no street lights and no other cars, the kind where you simply have to trust that you remember the way. And she had remembered the way. Her hands had remembered it even when her mind drifted. The left at the old food store that had closed years ago, the long curve along the creek, the gravel turnoff with no sign that you would never find if you did not already know it was there. The body remembers the roads home long after everything else is gone. She had turned onto the gravel and felt the tires crunch and slow. And there, at the end of the headlights, low and dark against the darker trees, had been the cabin, waiting exactly where she had left it 3 years before. The cabin was not a grand thing, and Nora would have been the first to tell you so. It was one room and a loft, built of logs, that had gone gray and soft at the corners, with a wood stove squatting black and patient in the middle of it, and a small kitchen along the back wall that was really just a sink, a 2-burner stove, and a set of open shelves holding mismatched plates. There was a table Frank had made from a door, and 4 chairs that had never quite matched, and a sagging plaid couch that smelled, even now, of wood smoke and lake water, and something else underneath that Nora had never been able to name, but would have known anywhere in the world with her eyes closed. The windows were small. The floor was cold in the mornings. When it rained, the way it was raining tonight, you could hear every drop, and the sound filled the cabin up like water filling a cup, until there was no room left in your head for anything but the rain. For 50 years, this had been the place where the family came apart from the rest of the world and became, for a few weeks each summer, only itself. In town, there were jobs and bills and report cards and all the small machinery of an ordinary life. But at the lake, there was none of that. At the lake, there was only the water and the woods and the long, slow days that ran together until you lost track of which one you were in. Frank had loved it here more than anywhere on earth. And Nora had loved it because Frank loved it, and then over the years, she had come to love it for herself. The particular green smell of the morning, the loons calling across the water at dusk, the way the children's voices carried over the lake when they swam out too far and she called them back. There is a kind of place that holds a family together simply by existing, simply by being the one fixed point they all return to. And the cabin at Loon Lake had been that place for 50 years, and Nora had driven 3 hours through the rain to decide whether to let it go. They had bought it in 1974, she and Frank, when they were young and had no business buying anything at all. Frank drove a delivery truck for a bakery supply company, and Nora kept the books for a lumber yard, and between them, they made just enough to raise 2 children in a small house in town, and not $1 more. But there had been an old man named Pavelka who was selling his fishing cabin on Loon Lake because his knees had given out. And he was selling it cheaper than it should have gone, because he wanted it to go to a family that would use it, rather than to someone who would tear it down and build something with a name. Frank had heard about it from a man at the bakery. They drove up on a Sunday to look, just to look, they told each other. And they had stood in this very room with the afternoon light coming off the water, and Frank had gone quiet in the particular way he went quiet when something mattered to him. And Nora had known, before he said a single word, that they were going to find the money somehow. They found it somehow. People did in those days, when a thing mattered enough. If this story is staying with you, a quiet light helps me keep the lamp lit for others. Frank had been gone 3 years now. He had died in the early spring, in the house in town with Nora beside him. And it had been gentle, as these things go, which is to say, it had been the worst thing that had ever happened to her, and also, somehow, not unkind. In the time since, she had done all the things a person does. She had learned to sleep in the middle of the bed. She had figured out the lawnmower and the furnace filter and the strange business of cooking for one. She had been, by every outward measure, all right. But she had not come back to the cabin, not once in 3 years. The children had been gentle about it, but they had also been practical, the way children become practical about their parents. And over the last few months, the word sell had begun to appear in their phone calls, soft at first, and then a little less soft. The cabin needed a new roof. The taxes came every year, whether anyone went up or not. Nora was 74, and the drive was long, and the place sat empty. It made sense to sell. Everyone agreed it made sense to sell. Her son Daniel knew a man who knew a realtor. It would be simple. And so Nora had told them finally that she would drive up one last time, alone, to clear out whatever was worth keeping, and to say whatever a person says to a place before they let it go. The children had offered to come. She had said no. Some goodbyes you have to say by yourself. She got the stove going first, before she did anything else, because the cabin was cold with the deep, settled cold of a building that has been empty through too many seasons, and because Frank had taught her that you tend to the fire before you tend to your feelings, and the advice had never once failed her. There was dry wood still stacked in the lean-to where he had left it, 3 years seasoned now, and light as paper, and she built the fire the way he had shown her. Crumpled newspaper, a teepee of kindling, the patience to let it catch before you crowded it. And within a few minutes, the little stove was ticking and breathing and pushing a circle of warmth out into the room. She pulled a chair close to it. She took off her coat at last, and she sat for a while and listened to the rain and let the cabin warm up around her. And she did not cry, though she had expected to, because the cabin did not feel like a place where someone had died. It felt like a place where a great deal of living had been done, and the difference between those two things is everything, she thought, sitting there about all the summers. There had been so many of them, and they had seemed at the time as though they would go on forever the way summers do when you are in the middle of your life and have not yet learned that nothing goes on forever. She thought of Frank in his old canvas hat, standing thigh-deep in the lake at dawn with a fishing rod, perfectly still, perfectly content, the mist coming off the water around him. She thought of the children, small and brown and barefoot, running down to the dock with towels around their necks, and then older and sullen and embarrassed to be seen with their parents, and then older still and bringing their own children, so that the dock was full again of small brown barefoot bodies, and the cycle had simply begun over without anyone deciding that it should. She thought of the evenings on the porch, the citronella candle guttering, the cards on the table, Frank's laugh. He had a laugh that started low and built, a laugh you could feel in the floorboards, and the way the dark came down over the lake so slowly in July that you could read a book by the last of the light until nearly 10 o'clock. All of it had happened here. All of it had happened in this one small room, and on the dock below it, and in the water beyond. And it was strange, she thought, how a place could hold so much and ask for so little, how it could keep 50 years of a family safe in its walls and want nothing in return but a new roof every few decades and someone to keep the chimney clean. After a time, she got up and began, in a small way, to do what she had come to do. She washed the dust from the mismatched plates and stacked them. She found in a kitchen drawer a deck of cards so worn the corners had gone round, and the little notepad where they had kept score of a card game called Up and Down the River that only their family played, and that had rules so complicated no outsider had ever fully understood them. She found Frank's reading glasses on the windowsill, folded, waiting, as though he had set them down for a moment and meant to come right back. She held those for a long while. And then she set them back exactly where they had been, because some things you are not ready to move, and the windowsill could hold them a while longer. And then she came to the doorframe. It stood between the main room and the little back kitchen, a plain pine board gone amber with age and wood smoke, and it was covered, truly covered, in the marks of 40 years. Frank had started it the first summer with Daniel, who had been 4. He had stood the boy against the frame and laid a flat carpenter's pencil across the top of his head and made a small line, and beside it he had carved, with the little knife he always carried, the boy's name and the year. Danny, 1975. And the next summer he had done it again, and the boy had grown 2 inches, and Frank had carved the new line above the old one with a kind of satisfaction that Nora had teased him about and secretly loved. When their daughter Ruth came along, he started a second column for her. Ruthie, 1978. The lines climbed the frame, summer by summer, 2 children racing each other upward through the years. There were gaps where they had missed a summer. There were years where a child had grown so much that Frank had whistled, and years where they had barely grown at all and pretended to be outraged about it. The marks went up and up until near the top they simply stopped. Danny, 1991, and a few inches lower Ruth, 1993, because that was the age at which children stopped standing against door frames, the age at which they begin, without anyone quite noticing the moment, to leave. But the frame had not stopped there, because by then there were grandchildren. And so a 3rd column had begun, lower down, and a 4th. Smaller names in Frank's same careful hand, the knife a little less steady in the later years, but the love in it exactly the same. Caleb, 2001. Emma, 2004. There was a tiny line very low to the floor, marked Lucy, in 2011, first summer, for a baby who had been carried to the frame and held against it laughing because she could not yet stand. 3 generations climbing a pine board in a 1-room cabin, each line a Sunday, each Sunday a small ordinary miracle that no one had thought to call a miracle at the time. She knew every mark on that frame the way she knew the lines on her own hands. She could have told you the story behind any of them. There was the summer Danny had refused to stand straight because he was angry about something, some boyhood injustice long forgotten, and Frank had marked him slouching and written "Croot" beside the line as a joke, and Danny had been so offended that he had stood up perfectly straight the next day and demanded to be measured again. There was the year Ruth had grown 3 full inches and could not stop talking about it. There was the summer Frank had measured the family dog, a patient old retriever named Biscuit, down at the very bottom. Biscuit, good boy, with no year, because a dog does not grow in years the way a child does. And Frank had said it did not seem fair to hold Biscuit to the same standard. The frame was not just a record of heights, it was a record of jokes and arguments and small forgotten kindnesses, a whole family's worth of ordinary days pressed into the soft pine, and Nora was perhaps the only person left alive who could still read all of it. Nora knelt down in front of it in the firelight, with the rain loud on the roof, and she ran her fingers over the marks, the way you read something written in a language only you can still understand. She found her own children at the heights they would never be again. She found grandchildren who were grown now, who had jobs and worries and lives 3 hours away. She found Lucy's first summer an inch off the floor, and she had to stop for a moment over that one. And she thought, how do you sell this? How do you hand a realtor a board with your whole family carved into it? How do you let a stranger paint over 40 years of Sundays because the roof needs work and the taxes come every spring? She had not found an answer to that. That was the truth of why she had come. She had told everyone she was coming to say goodbye, but really, she had come hoping the cabin would tell her something, would make the decision easier or harder or simply clearer, and so far it had only made it heavier, the way the truth usually does. And then kneeling there, with the firelight low and her old knees aching against the cold floor, she leaned in close to read a mark near the very bottom of the frame that she did not remember, a mark lower even than baby Lucy's, down near the floorboard where no child had ever been measured. And she went still. It was not a height line. It was a few words, carved small and careful in Frank's hand, and the wood around the letters was paler than the wood around the older marks, which meant it was not old at all. She had to take out her own reading glasses to see it. There in the firelight, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. And when the letters came clear, she read them once, and then she read them again, and then she sat down fully on the cold floor because her legs did not feel entirely like her own. It said, Nora, still the prettiest girl at Loon Lake, and then a date. And the date was from the last autumn of Frank's life, the October before the spring he died. A season when, as far as Nora had known, the two of them had not come up to the cabin at all. But of course they had. She remembered it now, all at once, the way a thing comes back when the right door is opened. He had asked her that October if she would drive up with him for the day, just the two of them, just to close the place up for winter. And she had said yes without thinking much about it, because it was a thing they did every year. They had drained the pipes and stacked the wood under the lean-to and eaten sandwiches at the door table while the lake threw cold light through the small windows. It had been an ordinary day. She had not known. How could she have known that it would be the last time he ever set foot in the cabin he had loved for 50 years? He had known something, perhaps. Or perhaps he had not known anything at all and had simply, that afternoon, while she was outside shaking out a rug, knelt down at the bottom of the doorframe, where all the heights of all the children he loved were written, and added the one name that had never been on it, hers, the name of the girl he had brought here in 1974 with no money and no business buying anything, still the prettiest girl at Loon Lake. He had carved it down low where she would not see it, the way you tuck a note into a coat pocket for someone to find later when they need it. And it had waited there for her 3 years, through every season, in the dark and the cold and the empty, for exactly this night. Nora wept then, finally, but it was not the weeping she had braced herself for on the long drive up. It was the other kind, the kind that has more love in it than grief, though the two are so close together at that depth that you cannot always tell which is which. She sat on the floor of the little cabin with her hand over the words Frank had left her, and the rain coming down hard and steady on the tin roof. And she understood with a certainty that felt less like a decision than like a tide coming in, that she was not going to sell this place. Not now, not ever, if she could help it. You do not sell the doorframe where a man wrote that you were still the prettiest girl at the lake. You leave room at the top for the names that haven't been carved yet. You get the roof fixed, you pay the taxes, you bring the grandchildren up in the summer, and you stand the great-grandchildren against the pine when they come, and you keep the lamp lit and the wood dry, because some things are not a burden, no matter what the arithmetic says. Some things are the whole point. And she thought about the children, her own and their children after them, and what the cabin had quietly meant to each of them, even the ones who said they were too busy to come. Daniel, her practical son, who talked about taxes and roofs, and was the first to say, sell. Daniel had learned to swim off that dock, had caught his first fish there at 6, and wept when Frank made him throw it back, had brought the girl who became his wife up for a weekend the summer before they married, so that the lake could look her over, because some part of him had needed the lake's approval before his own heart would settle. Ruth, who lived furthest away now and called the least, has spent a whole heartbroken summer at the cabin at 19 after a boy had broken something in her and had come down off the mountain in September, mended, or mostly mended, the lake having done its slow, patient work. And the grandchildren, Caleb and Emma and little Lucy, who is not little anymore. They had their own summers stored up here too, their own first swims and first fish and first heartbreaks, whether they knew it yet or not. The cabin had been working on all of them, all those years, quietly, the way a place works, on the people who love it. You do not feel it happening. You only feel it gone, after, if you let it go. Nora understood now, kneeling in the firelight, that selling the cabin would not only be selling her own 50 years, it would be selling theirs. It would be reaching back through the door frame and pulling out one by one all those names. She stayed by the fire a long while after that. She did not clear out another thing. The plates could stay on the shelves. Frank's glasses could stay on the windowsill. The cabin did not need to be emptied. It needed, if anything, to be filled back up. And she was already in her mind, doing it, planning the call she would make to Daniel in the morning, the one where she would tell him to call off the man who knew the realtor, the one where her practical son would sigh, and then she suspected be quietly and enormously relieved, because children do not really want their parents to sell the lake, whatever they say about taxes. She thought about Lucy, who was old enough now to stand against the frame properly, and who had never once been measured there since that first laughing summer. She thought about a fresh line, carved high and proud next August. She thought about leaving the knife where Frank had kept it, in the drawer, with the worn-out cards, so that it would be there when it was needed. Because it would be needed, because the frame was not finished, and a family is never finished. Not really. Not as long as someone keeps the light on and the wood dry and drives 3 hours through the rain when it matters. She thought, too, about how close she had come to never knowing. If she had sent the children up to clear the place out, as Daniel had gently suggested, they would never have found it. They would have measured the doorframe with their eyes the way you measure a thing you mean to be rid of, seeing only the work of removing it. And the small, low carving down by the floorboard would have gone to the new owners, along with the rest, painted over, sanded down, lost. The thought made her cold in a way the fire could not reach. How many such messages, she wondered, are left for us in low and hidden places and never found? How many notes tucked in coat pockets we give away? How many words carved where we do not think to look? How much love left waiting for us that we walk right past because we are in a hurry, because we have decided the thing is finished, because we have already made up our minds to let it go? She did not know. No one can know. But she knew that she had nearly walked past this one, and that something, call it luck, call it Frank, call it the simple, stubborn need of an old woman to say goodbye properly and alone, had brought her down to her knees in front of the right board on the right night, and she would not stop being grateful for that for as long as she lived. The fire settled, the rain went on, softer now, a long steady whisper on the roof and the lake and the dark pines all around. Nora pulled the old plaid blanket from the back of the sagging couch and wrapped it around her shoulders, and it smelled of wood smoke and lake water, and the thing underneath that she had never been able to name, and now, kneeling tonight at the bottom of a doorframe, she thought perhaps she finally could name it. It was simply the smell of being loved in one place for a very long time. There is no better smell than that. There is no better thing than that. If you are still here with me, in the warm and the dark, with the rain coming down, then let this be what you carry off to sleep tonight. That the people who love us leave their marks in low and hidden places, down near the floor, where we don't think to look, and that those marks wait patiently for the night we need them most. That a small plain place, loved long enough, becomes the most valuable thing a family owns, no matter what the arithmetic says. And that somewhere in the doorframe of your own life, there is very likely a line carved just for you, in a hand you would know anywhere, telling you that you were and are and will always be the prettiest thing at the lake. Nora slept that night in the loft of the old pine cabin, under the sound of the rain, warmer than she had been in 3 years. And we can leave her there, with the fire glowing low, and the family safe in the wood of the doorframe, and the whole quiet lake, keeping watch in the dark. There is nothing left for her to decide. There is only the rain and the warmth and the rest. Thank you for spending this hour with me. If you'd like more stories like this one, subscribe. And I'll leave the light on for you next time. Rest well.